Suella Braverman is back in the news. You'd think that she wanted some sort of job in the opposition. But I don't want to talk about boats or borders, but about blame. Specifically the politics of blame from Suella Braverman and how her crusade against the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, the European Court on Human Rights, is not only a dangerous distraction but a fundamental misreading of our constitutional identity. Braverman is shutting the stable door long after the horse has bolted and willfully ignoring the elephant in the room. That's Brexit. And Braverman claims that Rishi Sunak wasn't willing to do what's necessary to stop illegal migration. That's a classic political manoeuvre, shift responsibility to someone else, preferably someone who can't answer back. She's now parading a 56-page legal blueprint, she calls it, for quitting the ECHR, as if Strasbourg judges were the root of our immigration woes. But blaming human rights law for policy failure is like blaming a fire alarm for a fire. The real problem isn't judicial constraint, it's ministerial incompetence. And the Rwanda plan collapsed not because of foreign interference, but because it was legally, morally and practically flawed. It was Suella Braverman's plan, inherited from Priti Patel. Priti Patel and Suella Braverman did not know what they were doing. The UK Supreme Court struck the plan down on domestic grounds. Braverman's central thesis that the ECHR prevents the UK from controlling its borders is not supported by law. The Convention doesn't prevent deportations, it only prohibits torture, degrading treatment and unlawful detention. These are standards that any civilized country should welcome, not whine about. I have good reason to be grateful to the ECHR. I took a case through the ECHR and won against Greece for torture. Even outside the Convention, UK courts would still enforce similar protections via common law and international treaties like the UN Convention Against Torture, so leaving the ECHR changes the optics, not the outcome. Now to the real animal in the room, that's Brexit. Braverman and her allies promised us that leaving the EU would restore sovereignty and end judicial overreach, yet here we are, years later, with the same populists now saying we need to leave another international treaty to regain control. This is the Brexit cycle on repeat. Blame outsiders, blame simplicity, promise simplicity, ignore consequences. In fact, the withdrawal agreement from the EU, which Brexiteers like Braverman helped shape, requires the UK to remain signed up to the ECHR if we want continued police and judicial cooperation. Article law.gen.3 spells it out clearly. Leave the ECHR and we don't just shed the Good Friday Agreement, we jeopardise EU relations, destabilise Northern Ireland and wreck cross-border criminal justice cooperation. What is the ECHR really? It's not a foreign imposition. It was drafted by British lawyers, championed by Churchill and shaped by the same legal imagination that brought us the Nuremberg trials. It safeguards the freedoms we claim to treasure, freedom of speech, of religion, of privacy and of assembly. And contrary to Braverman's claim of judicial imperialism, the UK wins the vast majority of cases brought against it in Strasbourg. UK courts are primary interpreters of the Convention. Strasbourg cannot overrule Parliament. It can only issue declarations of incompatibility, which Westminster may ignore, and has. Leaving the ECHR would cause constitutional chaos. It would breach the devolutionary settlements in Scotland and Wales where the ECHR is baked into law. It would upend the Good Friday Agreement, which guarantees access to the ECHR rights in Northern Ireland. It would place Britain alongside Russia and Belarus, the only two countries who have left the Convention. That's not sovereignty, that's isolation. Diplomatically, it would cripple our ability to hold other countries accountable on human rights. How do we challenge Saudi executions or Chinese repression if we've abandoned our own human rights commitment? So let's be clear. Suella Braverman is not offering a serious plan. She is offering a scapegoat. Her proposal to quit the ECHR is a populist illusion, not a solution. It ignores constitutional law. It misrepresents the human rights framework. It betrays the very freedoms that it claims to want to represent. Her arguments are legally shallow, historically illiterate, and politically dangerous. They rely on an emotive populism and mischaracterizations of the law while ignoring the constitutional, diplomatic, and moral consequences of leaving the Convention. It misunderstands her proposals misunderstand sovereignty. Sovereignty is not the absence of constraint, but the right to enter legal agreements. The UK chose the ECHR. Leaving would not empower Parliament, it would weaken the rule of law, as rights protections would become entirely political and revocable. It ignores devolution. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland all incorporate the ECHR into their devolution settlements. Unilateral UK withdrawal would trigger constitutional conflict, especially in Northern Ireland, where the ECHR is embedded in the Good Friday Agreement. And it's the claim which is made that the British people never voted for the ECHR. This is misleading populism. The ECHR is not an EU instrument. It was signed by the UK in 1950 with strong conservative backing. It has nothing to do with Brexit. Parliamentary sovereignty is not threatened. The ECHR has never struck down primary legislation. It offers declarations of incompatibility which Parliament can respond to or ignore. And Dominic Raab's ridiculous Bill of Rights in 2022 was widely condemned by legal experts, retired judges and the Joint Committee on Human Rights. It would have weakened existing rights, limited judicial review and restricted access to justice. Dominic Raab, silly boy anyway, sunning himself in Crete when he should have been manning the tiller and sorting out the direction that we were going when Kabul fell. Dominic Raab has no reason to puff himself up about this. Braverman's version would likely remove Article 8, the right to private family life, from deportation cases, but that would require new international breaches, not just domestic reform. So on so many levels, we cannot build a credible immigration policy by tearing up human rights, nor can we restore trust by blaming treaties we helped to write. The real task is not to rewrite international law, it's to govern competently. And that means facing facts, not fantasies. That means getting somebody in the government who can actually do their job, rather than having some sort of spokesperson that will claim, some sort of distracting verbiage when you question. Oh, you can't question me. Oh, you're a misogynist. You can't question me. You're a racist. The problem really is that we are not holding the Home Office to account. The Home Office is not accessible. You can't contact the Home Office. You can't question the Home Office. Even in Parliament, an ordinary MP cannot question or contact the Home Office. They have to go through a series of text messages. We, as ordinary members of the public, cannot question or contact the Home Office. What we get through to, at the very most, is a helpline, which has nothing to do with the Home Office, which has no power and no purpose, really, and often gives misleading and contradictory information. And as for Suella Braverman, that means she has to finally face the elephant in the room. She has to finally account for and explain why she thought Brexit would work. But Brexit hasn't worked. And those people who claim it has are living in a fantasy world. Brexit hasn't worked, and you can't blame yet another institution for a bad decision.